Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here as part of this amazing panel. I'm sitting here being inspired, and I thank you for the comments that you've made and the comments that you will make. And I'm really very grateful for the opportunity to be here to express my appreciation to Marie. Saadia Gaon was a 10th century Jewish philosopher who believed there was a rational basis for God's commandments, said that the first principle upon which many of the commandments are based is that of gratitude. And then from that comes prayer, and from that comes blessings, and from that comes honoring parents, etc., etc. And I feel very privileged to be able to express that gratitude, not just because it's my own personal feeling, but because it comes from the deep sense of religious commitment as an obligation to express that, and I thank you for the opportunity to do that. About 25 years ago or more, Marie Fortune reached out to what was then a much younger rabbi who was just feeling his way in the rabbinate and in the domestic violence and child abuse area. I stumbled across it. Now's not the time to go into those details. And I think in looking for rabbinic voices, I was very privileged that people in Seattle found me all the way on the East Coast and invited me to be part of trainings, videos. I became a star of film as a result of I would go places. Oh, we saw you in that video, and it gave me the opportunity, first of all, to learn, because I had really no business making training videos. I'm really a great novice in this, but to learn, being forced to by being part of that enterprise, but to develop and to get a friend and a mentor and a teacher. Since then, when I've spoken about my experiences and those people who have been formative in who I became as a rabbi and as a human being, the name of Marie Fortune is on the top. And it surprises a lot of my rabbinic colleagues, which is a good thing. But I really very much appreciate friendship, your confidence in me, and the inspiration that I've gotten. Inspiration in many ways, because I've learned many things from Marie. And number one is you cut through I can't say it in this country. Because you know what I mean. She calls people out. And she called me out on many occasions, especially in our conversations when, I guess as a product of a certain type of seminary and theological education, and I thought I had the answers, and I had the pat responses, and I had the frameworks in which I was trained, and she would call me out on that, and to think about it, to restructure my thoughts, to come up with new answers and with different answers, and I think that was a wonderful thing. She made it very comfortable for a traditional Orthodox rabbi to be surrounded mostly by women and others who were not like him. Even in the room this evening, looking around, it's hard to tell from outer appearances, but I'm a very small minority here, but comfortable with that because of those experiences that we had, and my exposure and comfort, indoctrination into feminism, and to challenge some of those assumptions that I had about my tradition and about my role in the world and my place in the world. And it got to a point that Marie actually became a problem with my wife and myself, because I became more of a feminist than my wife, and we had interesting conversations and discussions as a result. I remember a conversation that we had. We met a couple of times where 40 representatives of faith and spiritual leaders working on a project that was originally financed by the Department of Justice for the Office of Violence Against Women, and that kind of changed along the way, where I met some of the wonderful people that are here and many others. Remember a comment that Marie made at the time, why this work was so important, and why the multi-faith work was so important in the area of domestic violence. Because, as she pointed out, it's so easy to sit here and see the problems that other people have in their denominations. We know, as an outsider, what's wrong with the Catholic Church. We know, as an outsider, what's wrong with this group or that group or the other group. And that group and the other work that was done gave us the ability to hold it for somebody else to hold up to the mirror and say, okay, now you look at yourself. And what was easy to kind of justify from my own tradition and rationalize from my own tradition was no longer easy to justify and rationalize, because I understood what it was, how the problem existed there, and then I began to understand how the problem existed within me. She gave me language and categories by which to define things and understand things and articulate things. Those phrases of religion as a resource or a roadblock, I think I quoted, if I had to pay you royalties for all the times I used those, Faith Trust would not have any financial problems today, but you didn't trademark them, so I've stolen them. You've taught me appreciation for others. We talked a lot about domestic violence and about child abuse and about ministerial misconduct, but we spoke a lot about our own faith and our own commitment and our own understanding. And he gave me a real appreciation to understand Christian traditions that I had no access to before, to understand Muslim traditions that I had no access before, and to really feel that I made friends and that their experiences affected me and that my experiences affected them as well. And the times we spent Shabbat dinners together or other kinds of things were really very formative for me and for my family. My son, who was at a high school student in an old male Jewish parochial school, you can imagine the dynamics of an old male parochial school, who stood up in the class in 10th grade and 11th grade and said, don't speak that way about women, or don't speak that way about Muslims, because my father has friends, and I met them, and that's no way to speak. And so you've empowered, that's just by your being, and you've changed us. I was privileged to be part of Marie taught me what it means to be a leader, what it means to stand up, what it means not to be afraid, and what it means to have the strength of your commitment and your values, and to be willing to suffer the consequences of those commitments in order to bring change. And as a result, eventually I formed this organization, JSAG, to deal with issues of abuse within the Jewish community, and stood up against not only my peers, but my teachers and other leaders in my denomination. I had wonderful opportunities, whether it was the videos that we spoke about, or the Jewish Advisory Committee that existed at that time, or to be part of the Leadership Council at a different point, or so many things. Were very dear and precious parts of the work that I did. Marie helped me understand a couple of very fundamental Jewish principles. One is the term tzedakah. Tzedakah, some of you may be familiar with the term, and we generally translate that as charity. But Jewish tzedakah is not charity. Because charity means that you somehow feel sorry, somehow you have some kind of pity, and you're helping someone who is less fortunate. But the Hebrew word for tzedakah, it's a biblical word, really comes from the word tzedek, which means righteousness and justice. And that the act of tzedakah, of charity, is not out of a feeling of pity, but it's out of a feeling of justice and of righteousness and making the world better, and making the world safe, and making the world right. The second word, which I appreciate more in its nuance, the Jewish term called chesed. Chesed is generally translated as kindness. But it's, in certain ways, much more than that. Because in rabbinic literature, when chesed, when kindness is used, it's referred to as gemilut chesed, the bestowing of kindness. But in Hebrew, which is a much sparser language than English in terms, words are used in many different contexts, and they have overlapping meaning and give you insight into what the ancients thought that the term actually meant. The word gamal, to bestow or to give, is also used in the biblical sense for weaning, for maturing. So, for example, when the verse speaks about Sarah having nursed Isaac and then weaning him, that word gamal is used. It's a sense of maturity. Now that Isaac is no longer a child, an infant, he has matured. And so the fact that the rabbis of old used that term gemilut chesed, gemilut chasadim, means that kindness is not, that there's something else to kindness. And that kindness needs to be expressed in a mature fashion. But it's not just passing it on. It's not just handing a dollar to a person who is homeless. It's not just smiling at somebody who may be lonely. But there's a certain maturity. There's a certain gravitas that has to be brought to the act of giving kindness to others. And I learned that when I observed Marie and the people that worked with her and the things that she did, that there was a real seriousness of purpose in the justice making, but in the kindness that was bestowed upon others, which changed lives and literally saved lives. And I'd just like to end with one other statement from rabbinic literature, which if they had to put that in the creating that Talmud today and had pictures next to it, so Marie's picture would be next to that. In quoting the verse from Deuteronomy chapter 6, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might," the rabbis of old wanted to know, how do we express our love for God? How do you command the feeling? How do you express that feeling? And they suggested that it really wasn't about a feeling, but it was about something else. That one shows one's love for God by making the name of heaven, by making God beloved by others. And then it goes on to explain what's the case. If a person is a scholar, knows biblical and rabbinic texts, the person is observant of all of the ritual, and at the same time is honest, and is friendly, and is kind to others, and is present for others, of this person, what do they say? Happy are the parents that taught this person the Torah, the tradition. Happy are the teachers that taught this person Torah and the tradition. This person who learned Jewish theology and scripture, look how wonderful, look how kind, look how compassionate, look how just that person is. I would like to learn that tradition and be part of those people. Of these, it is said, the verse in Isaiah is quoted, "You are my people, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified." But, says the Talmud, take the same person who was studied and learned and is observant of all of the ritual, but is unkind and is dishonest and is not good to people. Of that person, what do others say? Woe to the parent that taught that person Torah. Woe to the teacher that taught that person Torah. If this is what Torah represents, if this is what religious ritual and commitment and influence creates, then I want no part of it. It's the difference between what we call Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of heaven, and Chil Hashem, the desecration of heaven. So I got to meet Marie Fortune over 25 years ago, who was learned in her tradition and in mine, who was committed to the study of scripture and theology, who was committed to religious practice, but who was kind and compassionate and active in creating a world of justice. Of her, what do we say? Happy are her teachers who taught her tradition, her Torah. Fortunate and happy are her parents who passed on to her their tradition. Happy are those who see her and influenced by her, who have learned from her. We want to be, and we want to be, just like her. Of her it is said, happy are you, and fortunate are you, in whom God says, I will be glorified.